I had signed up for it because I didn't think I could do it. The memorization part was difficult, but I wasn't much for the spotlight bit either. I was incredibly busy with school, and so by the time the performers for Poetry Out Loud met on that Thursday, I had been on campus for almost 12 hours. I was still in my clothes from the day, while others had gone home and suited up for a gala. The group consisted of an unsorted batch of strangers, making me a brown crayon in a pile of hazel. An hour before showtime, we were all told to practice out back for a few minutes. We dispersed, and I found an unoccupied sidewalk to rehearse on. I balanced precariously across the curb, repeating my opening lines about the beauty of music, my controlled breaths keeping me flat on the ground. I was practicing my rote repetition, echoing the tongue-twister terms and the menagerie of archaic phrases when I spotted what looked like a lost puppy of a boy. He was pacing back and forth, his steps accelerating him into a whirlwind of stress. His shiny sneakers glinted into my eyes what remained of the daylight, each of his fists being thrown around often to hide the inevitable reality of his nervous tremors as his mind clearly begged for Shakespeare to stick. Past that sight were three performers, all breathing heavily, one in a fetal position, two closing their eyes and praying to whatever God could get them through this day, three's stone face, removing all personality within a 5-foot radius, trying to convince himself that he is something serious and emotionless and therefore worthy. None of them talked to each other. I called everyone together with some authority granted to me by my self-proclaimed nervous confidence, and I talked to them all. We formed like linemen and blockers, breathing into each other's faces and staring into each other's intent eyes. I saw that each of these kids was nervous, thinking that they didn't belong or were going to tank. And I told them boldly, proudly, and happily that every one of us was going to blow the audience's minds. I assured them that they were the bravest, most dedicated, and best prepared kids on the campus for the journey ahead. We would work together and distribute art directly to the unsuspecting souls of the ticket buyers, like our quarterback's cannon of a throw. Smiles abounded, and the devout follower of the poetry god from before even showed a hint of excitement. Show's on. One person sneaks beyond the curtain, not to be seen again until they publicly confess their nervousness through tense speech into a microphone. As we waited in the back of the stage, my heart became a carnal beast trapped within my chest, although the devolution of organs epitomized with the guy sitting out back, barely controlling his breath, sitting alone in the barely lit, stale late January air. I sat next to him. I looked into his eyes and they smiled, and he held back those two respiratory monsters, and I simply said,
"Let's do this thing."
He laughed, breathing life into his deer-in-the-headlights mind. He went up 10 minutes later, knocked him dead, and thanked me for believing in him afterwards. The Bard was up next, and to cut to the chase, a quarter of the audience must have asked this modern-day Serrano for his number after the show. I was on after him, and I knew I was mentally ready. I don't remember much of the performance past the blaring lights, the voice of my best friend in the front who had come for extra credit, the smile of my English teacher to my right, and the knowledge that everyone was rooting for me, like a waking performance of a dream. The rest is all a blur of emotions and words and possibly a mistake or three. However, my faults fell to the floor because I returned to the back of that stage to high fives and hugs and enthusiastic support like I had just won the Super Bowl. The night progressed thus, and everyone was in high spirits and sweats by the time we all lined up afterwards to accept the awards. I really was of the apathetic house, but when they called me up for second place, I humbly laughed, a grin stretching across my face, and I couldn't help but be proud of myself. I actually don't remember what prize I won. I put the little poster thing for participation somewhere. I could look up the words to the poems probably. I might even be able to remember a few clips from the stanza, given enough time. But I'll never forget John's face after he stood on that stage and asked to compare the audience to a summer's day, or Sam's appreciative hug after I told my life verses through the words of another. If I could have gotten first by praying to a prose prophet or walking myself into a human vortex, I don't know. And I do not care.